Excessive borrowing by the government has several implications for the economy as well as for the individuals living in a country. The implications for individuals are generally along the lines of increased inflationary pressures and increased tax burden over in future. And the implications for economy are basically slowed down growth rates and reduced output and reduced income for productive sectors of the economy. And I can explain how this works actually because there's a fixed supply of capital in the market. This capital can either go towards productive income generating purposes, or this can go towards unproductive uses. When the private sector borrows, they usually deploy that capital or channel that capital to uses that will generate more income in the future. They would use that capital to invest in capacity. They would use that capital to bring more efficiencies in their operations, conserve energy, reduce their costs. They would use that capital to access new markets or upgrade their products and services. So, all in, when the private sector invests money, borrows to invest money, then the private sector deploys it in an area where it stands to earn far more than the cost of borrowing. The government has no such inhibitions. It doesn't have to be constrained by specified rates of return or target rates of return on its expenditure. In fact, much of the government expenditure is actually quite unproductive. In Pakistan, we've got like five major heads of expenditures. The first one is debt servicing. Debt servicing basically means returning the principal on existing borrowings and paying interest on those borrowings. And the next one is defense expenditure, which again is unproductive in the sense that it doesn't lead to increased income in future years. So some of it may be essential and combat related, but the rest of it is just salaries and perks and benefits. The third head is administrative and governance expenses, and these are the expenses of the government agencies, civil servants, service providers such as police and judiciary and all of that. These expenditures are also significantly high in Pakistan. And then you have the good kinds of expenditures. These are expenditures that go towards social service or infrastructure development. Social service basically means providing free healthcare or free education to children, or providing income support to the most vulnerable people in the country, so that they are lifted out of poverty. And then infrastructure expenditures would be perhaps things that facilitate commercial or industrial activity by having proper logistics links that reduce the distance or the time taken to transport products, for example, motorways or highways, or electrifying off-grid areas, or spending on clean water and sanitation projects. So those are positive expenditures or desirable expenditures that have the potential to raise the productivity and income in future years. So we've sort of established that when the private sector is borrowing, it invests in productive purposes, and when the government borrows, not all of that investment is diverted to causes that are income generating. Now, the implications for smaller businesses when the government is out there borrowing in significant amounts are that one, it raises the cost of capital, which basically means it drives up interest rates because both these groups are competing for the same capital or same money. So it does that. And then because banks are traditionally risk averse and banks have historically considered government borrowing as a minimal risk borrowing, therefore the banks they get lazy. I mean, if they can generate a positive rate of return by doing the easy thing, why would they spend their time and resources in doing a proper due diligence and going out there in the field and sort of lending to the people, the productive people who need that money, the productive businesses who need that money? So over time, historically, the government borrowing has been considered risk-free for two reasons. Because, in theory at least, the government has the ability to tax more and generate the revenues, and the government has the ability to print money. Now, in practice, and we've seen it over the past couple of decades, that even though there's an ability to tax, the willingness to tax the untaxed segments of the economy, like agriculture or real estate, is simply not there because there is no political interest to tax these sectors. So, the ability of the government to raise more revenues in the future is also significantly restricted by their political motivations, and the ability to print money is also I would say under stress in the current circumstances because of inflationary pressures. Is already inflation is at decades high numbers. So if you print money now, it will simply raise prices more because that money starts chasing more goods and services, and that results in further inflation. So both of those assumptions are under challenge, and I hope that it encourages the banks to look towards the more productive segments of the economy, that is the corporate segment and the industrial segment and the commercial segments, and encourage growth there and supply capital there rather than go for the easy money, which is lending to the government, because the sustainability of government debt is now under question. Um, we've seen in the case of Lebanon and Argentina, especially, that they have had to, when they had to restructure their external debt, they also ended up restructuring the domestic market debt. So that is something that the commercial banks should now worry about because a significant part of their portfolio is invested in government securities or has been, they have lent to state-owned enterprises backed by government guarantees. So all of that could come up for rollovers or restructuring or haircuts, and that is a risk that is quite pronounced now.